When you are afraid and when you're in trouble, then you grab anything you can get your hands on.
But Dr. Tony Evans says too often our best hope is our last resort.
When you lose confidence in God, then you choose the world's way to take care of your business.
This is The Alternative with Dr. Tony Evans, author, speaker, senior pastor of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship in Dallas, Texas, and president of the Urban Alternative. Everything looks smaller when it's far away. Today, Dr. Evans explains why that's true of God, too, especially when we're caught up in trouble and in need of deliverance. He'll talk about how to solve that distance problem as he brings us today's lesson. Let's join him.
Whenever I go to the hospital or visit or counsel someone or talk with someone who's going through a crisis that has them very insecure, afraid, they're nervous, they're sweating, inevitably, I, along with most ministers, I presume, call their attention to Psalm 34. Because Psalm 34 is a psalm that brings comfort when you are afraid because your circumstances are very difficult. We've been talking about the blessings of fearing God. To fear God is to awe him, to reverence him, to respect him for who he is and the position that he holds. We have outlined a number of those blessings. Psalm 34 addresses a very practical blessing that fearing God brings, and it is the blessing of divine deliverance when your world is falling apart. All of us know what it is to go through the winter and the fall and the summer times of life. And yes, occasionally run upon a springtime. But there's not a person here who has not or will not run into the winters of life. When everything is gone wrong, going wrong, and it has produced all kinds of emotional baggage that you still have to carry. The psalmist summarizes one of two particular blessings, and he summarizes it in verse 4 when he says, I sought the Lord and he answered me, and he delivered me from all of my fears. They looked to him and were radiant. Their faces shall never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he rescues them. He talks about him being in a day of trouble, and that day of trouble producing insecurity and fear and trembling. Anybody ever been there? When you're in a day of trouble and the palms are sweaty and the knees are knocking and nervousness consumes you and you need to be delivered. He lets us know that this day of trouble wasn't one thing, it was a whole bunch of things. Because he says he delivered me from all my fears, plural. So he had it coming at him from a multiplicity of directions. The Psalms, by and large, were not written in isolation. That is, they were not written in vague general statements unrelated to the situation in life. In other words, it was written because it was connected to real life scenarios. I hope you know the Bible is a real life book with real life people facing real life dilemmas under the eyes of a real life God. See, you'll notice something at the front of verse 34. It's called a superscription. A superscription was an introduction to a psalm based on its historical context. In other words, what prompted the psalm to be written in the first place? Most of your Bibles will have the superscription in it because it will say a psalm of David when he feigned madness before Abimelech, who drove him away and he departed. Anybody see that superscription? Okay. Now, normally you'd skip it, wouldn't you? Normally you'd say, well, let's get to the verse. Now, you understand, The psalm was written because of the superscription. In other words, David wrote Psalm 34 because of the problem that he was in, as indicated in the superscription that introduces the psalm. So the next time you're reading through the psalm and you see a superscription above it, they are telling you what caused the psalm to be written in the first place. Which means you can't fully understand nor appreciate nor relate to the psalm unless you go back to the situation that gave birth to it. So why don't we travel back for a moment to when David feigned madness before Abimelech. See, that's found in 1 Samuel 21. David has come off of a mighty victory. You know it well. David has slain Goliath. David has come off of a mighty victory in which he has beaten the Philistine champion. He has killed the champion, and he fearlessly approached Goliath in the name of his God. With a slingshot and confidence in God, the giant 9'9" Goliath has fallen. But after that event, Saul, the king of Israel, became jealous and envious of David. And now he wanted David's life. The context of 1 Samuel 21 is David running for his life from Saul. After having just recently killed Goliath, he has recently destroyed a 9'9" giant. He's now running from a 7'1" king. He panics and he runs and he is afraid. One moment he's on the mountaintop, the next moment he's in the valley of despair. Have any of you taken that trip downhill before? One moment on top of the world, the next moment in the gutter, at the bottom. And you're in terror. A switch in the seasons, if you will. So, watch this now. David is running from Saul. He gets away to the priest, and will you know it? One of Saul's servants is there. He running, but he can't hide. He tries to get away from the problem, and he runs into the problem. You ever tried to get away from a problem only to run right back into it? David says to Ahimelech, now is there not a spear or a sword on hand? For I brought neither my spear nor my weapons with me because the king's matter was urgent. Of course, that's a lie. He was running from the king. Then the priest said, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah, behold, it is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you would take it for yourself, take it, for there is none other except that one here. And David said, there is none like it, give it to me. What is David doing? When he had faith in God, and he had confidence in God, a slingshot was enough. When he lost faith in God and fear took over, he went to get the world's sword to fix his problem. He went and got the sword of the enemy, Goliath. Because you see, when you lose confidence in God, then you choose the world's way to take care of your business. It goes back to Goliath's sword. And remember, he told Saul when he slew Goliath, I don't need a sword. I've got a slingshot, I've got God, I don't need a sword. But when you are afraid and when you're in trouble, then you grab anything you can get your hands on. He's running from Saul. Now he goes to Achish, king of Gath, with Goliath's sword. Here's what David is thinking. David is thinking, look, Saul won't look for me in Philistine territory. Let me go over to the enemies of Saul, because they're not going to hunt for me there. So I will make myself incognito in Gath, or to put it in everyday contemporary terminology, I'm in trouble. Let me run hot out in the world, because Philistines were pagans. They were non-believers in God. Let me take human methods, hide out in a worldly environment, because I'm going to be a lot safer there. Anybody ever done that? Things get so panicky, so difficult, that you run to the world's way to fix it, using the world's method to correct it, hanging out with worldly people in order to camouflage the difficult situation that you might be facing. David is now hiding out in Philistine territory, using Goliath's sword as his hope, confidence, and as his weapon. We got a problem. Verse 11. But the servants of Achish said to him, is this not David, the king of the land? Did they not sing of this one as they danced, saying, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s? And David took these words to heart and greatly feared Achish, king of Gath. He's up a creek without a paddle. He's in a pinch. He's in a ditch. He's in trouble. And he's not afraid. The text says he's greatly afraid. Because now, remember, he's alone. So he doesn't even have anybody to help him out. He's stuck. The question is, what am I going to do? Well, let's tell you what he did. Verse 13. So he disguised his sanity. To disguise means to put on a face, to hide. He disguised his rational approach to life before them and acted insanely in their hands. He acted like he was crazy. Then Achish said to his servants, behold, you see the man behaving as a madman. Why do you bring him to me? Get him out of here. He crazy. Chapter 22, verse 1 says he went to the cave of Adullam. In the cave, David sits down and writes Psalm 34.
Dr. Evans will come back with some more background for us in just a moment. Right now, though, he's here with a special holiday greeting. Dr. Evans?
Happy Thanksgiving. I know you got the turkey working, and I know you got the dressing cooking, and I know I'm just sorry I can't be there to eat it with you. But happy Thanksgiving to you, and may God bless you and yours as you gather. I hope you enjoy friends, family, of course, football, but also faith. I hope that your time of prayer and time of celebration of family will be glorious. Well, as you gather to say thanks to God, would you remember the ministry of the Urban Alternative? Would you maybe express thanksgiving for what God is doing through this ministry in your life? And if God so moves you, as I hope he will, would you share a special Thanksgiving offering with us so that we can be strong coming to the year-end portion of our calendar?
That's right. We depend on your support to keep bringing you Tony's teaching and to continue our work equipping pastors, church leaders, and congregations to carry out God's kingdom agenda. Giving Tuesday is coming up next week, a great opportunity to let Dr. Evans know he can count on your help. And as a way of saying thanks for your contribution of any size, we'd like to send you Tony's current CD teaching series called The Blessings of Taking God Seriously. It's a look at ways to make a higher priority of your relationship with the Lord and experience the unbelievable benefits in store when you do. The Blessings of Taking God Seriously will show you how to restore and refresh your connection with God. And it's our gift to you when you visit tonyevans.org and make any donation, large or small. Don't put it off because this special offer is only available for a limited time. That's tonyevans.org. Or call our 24-hour resource center at 1-800-800-3222 and let one of our team members help you. That's 1-800-800-3222. Well, right now, Dr. Evans is back with more of today's lesson.
Psalm 34 comes at the end of this story, because remember the superscription, when David feigned like a madman. Now we can go to Psalm 34. Verse 4, let's look at it again. I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all of my fears. The author of 1 Samuel does not tell us that while he was going through this period of being terrorized by one situation after another situation, he was seeking God. We don't find that in 1 Samuel, but David lets us in on the fact that when he saw himself between a rock and a high place and all of his options were gone, he remembered the Lord. I sought the Lord and I talked to him about all of my fears. I don't know what has you tripping today. I don't know what has shaken you up. I don't know whether you have a fear or a whole conglomerate of fears. David says the key is where you take them. He says, I took my fears to the Lord. And then we find something very interesting in verse 5. It says, they looked to him. Who is the they that looked to him? And he uses the plural again in verse 5, and their faces shall never be ashamed. So then the question is, to what do the they refer? At the end of verse 4 he says, and delivered me from all of my fears, plural, they. I'd like to suggest what he's talking about, the they, are not other folk, because he's running by himself. The they are referring to his fears. All of my fears, they. I told my fears, stop looking at your problems. When you read the Psalms, you'll regularly find David talking to himself. Because when you're scared and alone, ain't nobody else to talk to. You know? So he says, this poor man cried to the Lord. He's talking to himself, but now he tells all of his fears, all the things worrying him, all the troubles which are making him afraid. He says, I want you to stop looking fears at the thing that is making you afraid. And fears, I want you to start looking at the one who can fix it. He tells his fears to redirect. Stop staring at the problem, because all you're going to do is become more greatly afraid. And start staring at the Lord. This poor man cried to the Lord. He says, when I told my fears to start looking at God and stop looking at the circumstances, they, my fears, looked to him, God, and were radiant. Now, that looked like a change of seasons to me. He says, when my fears focused up, instead of my circumstances, my fears changed temperature. Because to be radiant means to shine. See, when you're scared and in trouble, shining is not your particular nuance. You're crying, you're discouraged. He says, but my fears looked to him and they became radiant. Their demeanor changed, my demeanor changed, and their faces shall never be put to shame. In other words, my fears won't win. What's bringing me down is not going to win. David cried to the Lord. In verse 17, he broadens it. He says, the righteous cry and the Lord hears and delivers them out of their trouble. So he takes what he said about himself in verse 5, and then he broadens it to everybody else. In fact, he broadens it in verse 19. Many are the afflictions of the righteous. So don't let anybody tell you just because you're saved, you don't have trouble. The Bible doesn't teach that. I'm saved, nothing goes wrong. In fact, you haven't seen stuff go wrong till you get saved. Many are the affliction of the righteous, but the Lord delivers them out of them all. He's talking about God's ability to deliver you when you're trapped. Because he's trapped. You know what worry is? Worry is staring at your circumstances. He didn't deny his fears. He just told his fears to look elsewhere. Fear, you are no longer to stare at circumstances. Fear, I dare you to stare at God. And when the fear looked up and focused on the S-O-N, on God, all of a sudden, the effects of the sun made the dark fears radiant. If you just look back to chapter 33 of Psalm, let me read verse 16. The king is not saved by a mighty army. A warrior is not delivered by great strength. A horse is a false hope for victory, nor does it deliver anyone by its great strength. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who what? Fear him, on those who hope for his loving kindness, to deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive in famine. Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield, for our heart rejoices in him because we trust in his holy name. Let thy loving kindness, O Lord, be upon us according as we have hope in thee. He says, I'm not going to look at my horses. I'm going to focus my attention on my God. Why? Because he says the eyes of the Lord are on those who fear him. The picture here is of a job that I used to have 30 years ago, 30 pounds ago, when I was a lifeguard. Actually, I was a water safety instructor, so I used to teach lifeguarding. So you become a lifeguard and you graduate and you become a water safety instructor so that you are now over the lifeguards. You train them and you oversee them. But the other thing you do with lifeguards is teach them how to watch. See, there's a lot of people out there in the water. And a lifeguard sits high and looks low because he's taking a big picture. He's scouring the whole pool. And you know what he's looking for? Somebody in trouble. The eyes of the lifeguard run to and fro, looking for somebody who's in trouble. Now, a lifeguard is trained to know when somebody's in trouble. If he's going down and ain't coming back up, he in trouble. That's obvious trouble. But there are many times when trouble is not as obvious. When people are struggling and you can easily think that they're playing when actually they are struggling. Life is full of trouble, Job said. This comes with living in a sinful world. It's full of trouble. Some you cause yourself, some others cause on you. It's just full of mess, stuff, issues. So I'm not going to give you any false sermons with any false hope that to fear God means no trouble, but I am going to tell you what David said. He delivered me. He delivered me. The superscription says, this is a Psalm of David, when he feigned madness in front of the king. So I got a question I want to ask you. How and when did God deliver David? He delivered David when David looked like he was crazy. You say, well, that's good for David. No, it's good for you. Verse 7, the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and rescues them. Anybody in here need to be rescued from something? Okay. Then what you need to do is fear God. Fear God is not a feeling. Fear God means to reverence him and give him the clout he deserves and tell your troubles to start looking at him.
Dr. Tony Evans, talking about the importance of where fear is focused when we're in need of deliverance. If you'd like a full-length copy of today's lesson, we have that available for you. Search for the title, The Blessing of Divine Deliverance, when you visit us at tonyevans.org. Better yet, get it as one of the 8 full-length messages in our current series, The Blessings of Taking God Seriously. It includes a lot of material we haven't had time to present on the air. And don't forget, right now, it's yours on CD as our thank you gift when you support Tony's ministry with any contribution God leads you to make, large or small. As always, the details are waiting for you at tonyevans.org, where you can browse through our huge library of resources and learn how you can read through the Bible with Tony on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Again, that's tonyevans.org. We also have team members standing by in our resource center around the clock at 1-800-800-3222. Again, that's 1-800-800-3222. Tomorrow, more from Dr. Evans on the blessing of divine deliverance, including a look at what to do if you feel like you're stuck on a spiritual roller coaster. I hope you'll be with us. The Alternative with Dr. Tony Evans is brought to you by the Urban Alternative and is made possible by the generous contributions of listeners like you.